Welcome to This is MoneyBall, the podcast about what happens off the pitch. I'm Georgie Frost, and as Lee recovers from his stag do in Bilbao, today I'll be looking at wrestling. Yes, little 7-year-old Georgie is super excited right now. But we're going to focus on one particular area, and that is wrestling tourism. Because like many good business ideas, my next guest's company was born out of a need that no one else appeared to cater for. So it was necessity, but as this is sport, also passion, I like to think, comes into it. Lifelong wrestling fan Lee McAteer struggled to get an affordable, convenient way to see the sports he loves. So he did it himself, launching the Wrestling Travel Company. Now Lee is fresh from WrestleMania 35 all the way over the other side of the pond into this studio. He has also recently become Associate Director at Tranmere Rovers, so we will talk about that in a few moments. But Lee, you know this, and loyal podcast listeners will know this as well. I used to have the WWF, as it was then called, toys. Yeah, I was a cool kid when I was younger.
It's still cool. Hey, they're probably worth a few bob now, Georgie, as well, if you've still got them.
Lee, no idea. I probably played them to death. But talking about that, I also had all the VHSs. I think the first one I remember was SummerSlam 88. Oh, it's a classic. So it was better than I could possibly imagine. Better than 7-year-old Georgie could possibly imagine.
It's better than you can possibly imagine because there's nothing else that's like it. You go to all these boxing events and you see a little bit of pyro, a little bit of video graphics, etc., but they're all trying to copy what the big wrestling companies are doing, your WWEs of this world, because they do it bigger and better than everybody else, and that's why you've got to experience it live.
Why wrestling? How did you catch the bug? When did you catch the bug?
Well, I was like you, Georgie. I was a little kid.
Poor thing.
It was one of the secret passions as a kid. And at the time, is it cool to say that you're a wrestling fan? Well, for me, I think it's starting to become not cool now. It's starting to transcend into popular culture. But as a little kid, had all the wrestling figures. In fact, still got some of them now. Wish they were in the boxes because again, they'd be worth a few bob. And then just grew up with it. Went to my first event at what was known as the G-Mex. It was Bret the Hitman Hart versus Ric Flair for the WWF Championship as it was then. And I was a huge Bret Hart fan, massive Bret Hart fan. But I also remember Papa Shango coming out with the smoke and thinking that there was some sort of voodoo going on, not knowing any different. But it was entertainment, and that's what it is. It's sports entertainment. It's physical theatre. Why wouldn't you enjoy it? It's entertaining. It's probably a lot of people's secret love, which they might not necessarily admit to out on social media.
Guilty pleasure, you think? For me, it was a little bit like Santa Claus, though, I'm afraid. Once you realised that it wasn't real, it sort of lost a bit for me. Is it completely made up?
Well, quite honestly, if you ever say to one of the talent that it's fake, expect...
Yeah, I wouldn't say anything like that.
Literally, if you ever say anything like that, you want to run the other way because to these guys and girls, it's real. The injuries are real. They give it absolutely everything they've got. And whilst there are storylines and there are decisions that are going to become the outcomes, the reality is that these guys, what you see they do in the ring, it hurts. And it's not an easy thing to do. And therefore, it's got to be respected.
Give us an idea for the uninitiated, just how big wrestling is financially.
It's $1 billion market. Yes, of course, WWE is the biggest one out there, but actually there's a new promotion that's recently been launched called All Elite Wrestling. What it means is that all of a sudden the WWE have now got competition. Now, what's really interesting is the family that's backing it is actually the Khan family that recently tried to buy Wembley.
That owns Fulham.
That own the Jacksonville Jaguars. But the fact that they're worth 3 times the amount that Vince McMahon is means that all of a sudden it's game on. It can only be good for the wrestling business because there's choice. And now you've got wrestlers that were very well known in WWE, such as Cody Rhodes, Chris Jericho, that now go into All Elite. It's a very cool time to be a wrestling fan, and there's huge money at stake, and that's why billionaires are investing big.
And why you launched a travel company and taking a slice of that pie. And of course you would be coming at this from a perspective of, wrestling is such big business. However, and I'm not saying it's not, in the States it's massive, but it seems to me, unlike a lot of other American sports, like the NFL, like the basketball, when we're seeing it coming over here, it's growing in this country. I'm noticing it a lot more in the press being written about. But it does seem to be, actually, it was the opposite that happened with wrestling. It was quite big in the 80s and 90s here, and it slipped off the radar a little bit. Is that fair, or is it just because it slipped off my radar?
No, I think it is fair. I mean, it's literally gone into peaks and troughs. We're obviously on the crest of a big wave at the moment. But yeah, I mean, it was huge in the 80s and 90s with your Hulk Hogan's. But it's becoming cool again because the independent scene of wrestling has seen a massive surge in popularity. But actually, when you think about how big the wrestling community is, so this is more so for WWE, but if you combine all of their social media accounts across the likes of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc., they are one of the first companies to have a combined following / likes, etc., of 1 billion.
Wow.
1 billion. Now, does that sound like a niche business? It's a huge market, and that's the reason why on Twitter, every time there's a show that's going on, they are the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trends all the time. That's why when you're watching one of their programs, they will purposely put the hashtag, the top left, because they know that they're going to get on the back of it. And the more people are talking about it, the more eyeballs there are, and the more money is there to be made. I mean, having just come back from WrestleMania, you would be amazed how many of people that aren't from the US.
Yeah.
I mean, I met people from Canada. In fact, obviously I'm biased here because a lot of them came through Wrestling Travel. But the reality is that we had people from Australia, Spain, Portugal, France, the UK, of course, Ireland. I'd love to know how many different nationalities were at WrestleMania. But I would imagine at WrestleMania, you're probably looking around about at least 20%, if not more, are actually from the international fans that actually attend that event.
Goodness. I'm wondering what perhaps the reason we're in a crest of a wave here, you suggest, about wrestling, it's like this comeback, is perhaps in the past it's been viewed as, dare I say it, a little bit tacky. It is the pinnacle of more entertainment over sport. But because the rest of sports, and I'm thinking here cricket is a good example, and the IPL has become as much entertainment almost as sport, that we're getting used to that now. The generations coming through now won't look at wrestling and think, oh, this is just fireworks and skimpy outfits and all that, because we're seeing sport now being so much more of a business, so much more of an entertainment business than perhaps it was of the past.
It completely is. I mean, I was having a conversation at the MK Dons game with a fellow associate director who was at a talk with Peter Moore from Liverpool. And in the talk, Peter said quite openly that he's in the sports entertainment business. And I think that gives you a real sign of where sports are, because let's be frank, is that the fans, rightly so, should be everything to these entities, and they want to be entertained, and that's what it's about. The better the entertainment, the better the product, the better the fan experience, and that's what it should be all about.
And it's competition for eyeballs at the end of the day.
Absolutely, competition for eyeballs, and when you look at things like what's happened in cricket, again, trying to create that spectacle, well, quite frankly, there's no bigger spectacle than the likes of your WrestleMania. That's why so many people watch it online, why so many people go to the events themselves. You know, we're not talking a few 10,000 here. We're talking up to, I mean, in Dallas, there was over 100,000 people watching a wrestling show. You know, this is not small fry. This is it's massive business. And actually, a lot of sport can take a deep look at how WWE do things and actually how they market their products. Because what you want is huge distribution channels to get your message out there. And actually, when I first started my AmeriCamp brand, a lot of it was very much influenced by WWE. I saw how they were doing things through Twitter, and I was inspired by that. And I think a lot of sports teams should be looking at how WWE and other wrestling companies market their product, because it gets it out there so much quicker.
Just in terms of WWE, how it works, because we've spoken about WrestleMania, that's obviously, it's a big event. Do they have it weekly? Do they have promotion, relegation? What's the system?
Gosh, well, there are so many different programs now. You look at the US side of things, so their flagship show is Raw and SmackDown, but then they've also got something called NXT. NXT is probably more so for your up-and-coming wrestlers, a little bit more for a hardcore audience, a little bit more edgier like it was in the late 1990s. But now in the UK, you've got a whole variety of independent promotions, and the WWE have noticed that actually they need to make a big play. And recently they've created NXT UK, which again you can watch on the WWE network. But then you can also watch your NXT that's US-based, SmackDown, Raw. And then, of course, you've got your pay-per-views itself. You've got your Big Four, which are probably still the Big Four since when you had the little figures yourself, Georgie, which is still Royal Rumble.
Couple of years ago, Ailey, couple of years ago.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Georgie. But, I mean, it's still the Big Four, the Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series, but there's so many pay-per-views all the time. And again, it's because they want eyeballs and they want to sell merch, and they're doing an incredible job doing that. I mean, Vince McMahon himself now is trying to create a rival to the NFL called the XFL. So he's trying to create American Football League in the off-season to be able to get the eyeballs, because the season NFL is so short. He tried it once before, but it didn't work for one reason or another. But he's very, very driven to achieve this. He sold a lot of stock to be able to put a considerable amount of money to get this going.
Will it have any crossover between wrestling and the NFL, or is it just
the first
American football?
American football. Well, the first one did, and they had commentators from WWE take part. But I actually think, and this is more my own personal opinion, I think one of the reasons why it wasn't taken so seriously as he wanted it to was because it had that WWE edge to it, and the fact that if people were used to a commentator on Raw or whatever it was, the reality is that are you going to take them seriously if you're talking about an offensive setup for American football? Probably not. So that's going to be very, very interesting, and I believe that's due to launch in 2020.
Well, we shall wait and see on that one. But let's focus now a little bit on your business, Wrestling Travelling Company. But also I just want to know, because you're also Associate Director at Football League 2 outfit, this is not your first foray into business, as you've just intimated there. You've got another company, and yet you're only 35.
Yes.
Sorry, you don't mind me.
No. I mean, I probably look about 55, whereas, of course, you look so much younger.
I'd like to point out I'm not far off 35, though, Lee.
Well, I'm driven. I'm so passionate in the fact that I feel like you got one shot at this, and I want to give it absolutely everything I've got. Our incredible chairman at Tranmere, Mark Palios, he's got a phrase, better never sleeps. And I think that's one of the reasons why I get on so well with him, because how he sees it is exactly how I see it. I'm driven and passionate. I want to achieve more. Growing up, I had the most incredible father, but the reality is that he pushed me so much that if I got to the moon, he'd ask me, why haven't you got to Mars? And that was just something that I grew up with. So every time I've had an opportunity to try and achieve something, I've always given it my all. Now, I'm not better than anybody, far from it, but I work so hard that's where I think what I lack in maybe some knowledge is I'll make up in, quite honestly, pure passion and hard work.
That's my motto. What I lack in skill, I make up for in enthusiasm. Covers a multitude of sins there. But talking about sports tourism, and that's really what the Wrestling Travel Company, of course, is all about. But this is, again, like I said, not the first foray into business, but not the first foray into sports business.
Well, I suppose initially from AmeriCamp, my first baby, co-founded it with my business partner, Nick Steers, who I was at law school with. I went and worked at a summer camp in the States, and quite frankly, I thought, rightly or wrongly, that I could do it better. From that, I managed to realise that there was a big need for sports coaches in America to help
Because there's a
kids.
real issue with pay, wasn't it? That people were going over to do these camps, which were very popular. I even looked at it, I think, when I was that age. And you just, you get paid £500 or something to go there, that people were losing money. And as a student, we don't really have money to lose.
No. Well, absolutely not. Especially when you're partying as much as I was back in the day. But no, I mean, I'm not here to bash other companies, but I went with the biggest rival and vice versa to AmeriCamp. And quite honestly, I thought that the setup was wrong. The salary should have been a lot more, because I wanted to be able to give people a true cultural exchange experience where they had enough money in their back pocket to actually go and see the wonderful sights of America. And I couldn't do that because I didn't make enough money. You've got to make money to live, and you want to be able to do great things. And when you're working so hard and you're on the football pitch coaching for 9-10 hours a day or more, or helping teach golf. I mean, I actually taught golf at the time when the Americans weren't winning the Ryder Cup, so maybe that might tell you about my golfing ability. But that's the thing, is that there were so many opportunities for, I suppose it's a slightly different variation on sports tourism in the fact that it's sports through cultural exchange. But straight away I knew there was something there. And there were so many amazing people out there who needed some great things to put on their CV. And when I managed to put the whole AmeriCamp package together, in which I could offer a $1,500 plus salary, cheaper costs, again, I appreciate I'm biased on this, but better customer values. It was fantastic, because I realised that we could make such a difference to so many, and the people that couldn't afford to do it now could. And actually, I felt I was on this insane mission to be able to help people go and live out their bucket list moments by helping to teach sports in America. And of course, from that, it's now moved on to Canada as well, with our AmeriCamp Canada brand. And there's no greater feeling when you're getting messages on Twitter or messages on Facebook or phone calls, or we've even had presents sent to the office as a thank you, because we're literally changing these people's lives.
It makes me think about when you talk about sport, being sport entertainment, is ignore the fans, ignore your customers at your peril.
Absolutely. To put into perspective, I used my LPC loan to basically create the business. And actually, from that loan, £8,000 of that went towards rent. So literally, we were setting up a rival company to a huge organisation with £4,000, which in itself is ridiculous. I mean, I remember going to a media party and Duncan Ballantyne saying to me, this is never going to work. You've got absolutely no chance. But actually, that was what drove me. And I was stubborn because I wanted to achieve. But then quite quickly, we realised that we had something special because we were the Facebook generation. We knew social media inside and out. We built the AmeriCamp business through Twitter. And we were the first organisation of our type to get that wonderful blue tick, and it was just such a huge thing. We're like, wow, we've got something. We've really, really got something here. And then we had some blue chip companies who wanted to sponsor us, and quite frankly, we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
We didn't have a clue. But what we did know about was that we could put ourselves in the shoes of the consumer, because we were the consumer ourselves and we knew what was good and what was bad.
So few companies do that. So you had the need for it, the gap in the market, as it were. You had the passion, you had the drive. A lot of people would have said, well, you had no capital, you had no money to do it. Surely it's going to fail based on that alone. You took a massive risk, though, didn't you? You gave up on your law course.
I did. I took a huge risk, and it was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my entire life. And I can't even begin to tell you the stress and the pressures that I was under. But the reality is that if you want to get anywhere in life, you've got to take a risk. I thought to myself, well, if I get this right, I can change people's lives for the better. For me, there was no greater feeling than that, and that's why I pursued it, and I'm so glad that I did.
I'm talking about changing people's lives for the better next year. My bucket list. Wrestling, yes. It led you on to starting up your wrestling travel company. Explain about that story.
Wow. Well, first and foremost, Georgie, you need to come with us to Tampa for WrestleMania 36. It's going to be, if you'd like to come, maybe yourself and Lee, you can report live from Tampa.
Yeah.
From one of our legendary parties.
Early on in the party, I would imagine. Probably a little bit later on, perhaps wouldn't be so good. Yeah, can't wait.
So it was a real funny one for me. Was, again, as a huge wrestling fan growing up and being inspired by how they marketed their product, my girlfriend at the time surprised me with tickets for WrestleMania 30. And I thought, wow,
what a woman.
What a woman. Why didn't I marry her? I don't know, but such is life. But literally, she got me the tickets. I thought this is going to be the most incredible experience. But then I realised how difficult it was trying to sort out all of the accommodation, trying to get the right flights, because we were quite last minute.
Well, she didn't sort out all those bits.
No, she didn't.
That's why you didn't marry her then.
Well, there you go. Now she knows. Now she knows that.
Next time, love. Actually, she can go through your company.
She can indeed. She can indeed. But when I realised how hard it was to actually put it all together, and actually there were so many different events in and around WrestleMania itself, is I thought, gosh, I would love to have the opportunity to be able to just pay one fixed cost. Everything's taken care of it. And all of a sudden, I know what events to go to, where I'm going, and I've got that concierge type service. So, because of Invasion Camp Group and our Abtabond, etc., we were already a travel company. So I thought to myself, well, if we can sort the tickets out, if we all of a sudden can do some great deals on flights and great deals on hotels, and we put it all together, and again, going back to my AmeriCamp way of thinking of putting myself in the shoes of the consumer, well, if we can put on great events where, in theory, you'd never normally go to. So, for example, recently I put an obscene amount of money behind the bar. So we call them the wrestling travel community. We said to the wrestling travel community, right, guys, enjoy yourself, get whatever you want, here it is. And then we surprised them with an ex-WWE superstar. So, again, it was those kind of experiences that I wanted back at WrestleMania 30. Yeah. And I've taken that to what is wrestling travel now. And we're already in talks with some huge, huge names to be part of our events for what's going to be in Tampa. I don't see them as customers, Georgie. I see them as people who've become friends. And the people that have gone on this trip, we give them a 2-week option to book with us again, and we give them a deposit and a payment plan so it's affordable rather than being one lump sum, because the reality is it's not cheap, and of course as a business we've got to make money to be able to do things, but we're offering experiences that if you're a wrestling fan and you're not quite sure how to do it and you want to meet like-minded wrestling fans and not be ashamed about being a wrestling fan, well, that's the reason why you choose Wrestling Travel.
Oh, you've just tapped in, I think, for me, as to why so many... We talk about sport being a business, but it's a different type of business. And so many people that go into sport with just a purely business mentality fail because they don't understand what it is like to be a fan. You are not just a customer having a transaction. You are so much more than that. And if sports clubs viewed their fans as friends rather than perhaps customers or people to eke every last penny out of, they would last so much longer there. They would engender so much better feeling. I just think we would have better sport in this country.
100%. I very rarely ever refer to anybody that comes through one of the brands, whether it's AmeriCamp, Camp Thailand, Wrestling Travel, doesn't matter. We never refer to them as customers, because the reality is that we're nothing without those people. We're nothing without them. And actually it's the same with a football club, which I've started to know very well after being given the wonderful opportunity by Mark and Nikki Palios at Tranmere. They care so much about the fans. It's not a business, it's a lifestyle choice in which they care more than anybody. If businesses, whether they're in sport or not, actually took that view, I actually think in the long term it'd be worth so much more money to them commercially, because you should care. Because if you don't care, your reputation's going to go down very, very quickly. It all taps in. You've got to care.
I really want to talk to you about Tranmere, but I do want to ask financially on wrestling, how much can people expect to pay? It's inevitably we're going to be asking this because it isn't cheap. So you have worked out payment plans in which it is easier for people to pay. Because next month I'm going to watch Barcelona against Getafe. I love travelling to watch sport. It's amazing. But if you take a look on the website for trying to get tickets, it has a tourist ticket price, which is €169 per ticket cheapest. And this is a 92,000 stadium. But that sort of money is ridiculous. The only way I can afford to go is because I know people who live there who managed to help me out on that one. But you do feel a bit like you're being ripped off. And I think a lot of package firms as well, you do worry. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do it yourself and you get ripped off from tourist prices. Do it with a company and you're really worried that you're going to be ripped off that way.
It's a really fair point. I mean, putting yourself in the shoes of the consumer is, so for example, Wrestling Travel's WrestleMania 36 package for existing customers is £1,999.
For how long?
6 days in downtown Tampa. That includes your great WrestleMania ticket, includes the parties, includes your flights. So it's again,
that's not unreasonable.
I don't think it's unreasonable. I mean, that's based on
a lot of money, but this is a trip of a lifetime.
Trip of a lifetime, based on 2 sharing. But actually, we try and put single travellers with other like-minded wrestling fans. And that's worked really, really well at the recent one in New York. It actually worked too well, if anything, because people wanted to sit next to each other and they were trying to swap tickets
or something now.
Well, actually, do you know what, George? I can't make this up. We actually had a couple at NXT who actually got engaged in one of the suites that we had. But this is some very left field. You would be amazed how many honeymoon couples come and do a Wrestling Travel experience. You'd be amazed by it.
I think you're telling the wrong person. I think that's amazing. I mean, you've met your match for life.
Well, maybe that's why I'm single now, because of the whole wrestling thing. Because nowhere in the world my ex would have.
Well, look, keep going on this. It sounds like still a black effort here. Okay, so that sounds pretty reasonable. And is it just WrestleMania, or do you do all of the other big ones?
We literally do all of the big ones.
How long have you been going for? I should ask you that.
We've been going since 2017.
Okay, so really young.
Yeah. Really, really young.
Where do you see you're taking this?
I mean, to put into perspective, we released the packages for WrestleMania only a few days ago. We put a waiting list out there or for people that were interested. And to put into perspective, we had 13,000 people.
Wow.
put their details down who wanted to be contacted about it. But what we've
globally or
globally.
Yeah.
But what we've done is we've offered it back out to our current customers. So we give them a slightly discounted rate. So it's basically £100 cheaper than what it is for a new customer. Because again, we value that customer retention. I hate the word customer, but just I suppose it is what it is there. Because again, we want to show added value and also say thank you for coming with us, because it's a really big thing. And actually, we don't want horrible people on our trips. We only want nice people. Obviously can't swear on the podcast, but we're actually going to be asking a question for when people are booking their packages. Are you a beep beep, yes or no? Because generally we want to know if you're good people, because we've got such
I'm wondering about the person that would say yes I am. Okay, go.
Well, they wouldn't be coming on a wrestling travel trip, I tell you that much. But we want to build that wrestling community. We're offering packages to Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, Survivor Series. We're offering packages to what is this new promotion for All Elite Wrestling for Double or Nothing, which is going to be headlined by Chris Jericho and Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks. And at the same time, we've now got requests for group bookings. But actually, we're trying to not just do the travel aspect of it when it comes to, say, people going from the UK or to America. We actually want to get involved with your local wrestling show. We want to get involved with people who want to go to, say, a show from in Germany, or maybe a Butlins or a Pontins. We want to be able to cover all aspects of that, or have meet and greets where you can actually come and meet your favourite wrestling superstar, or have a dinner with them, like an eat and greet, amongst other things. Because again, we want to offer those experiences that you wouldn't normally be able to get.
I was wondering whether, I mean, you mentioned Shard Khan there and the interest that he has in this field, whether we would see more wrestling over here and what that would do to the community here in terms of growing interest.
Absolutely. Well, I suppose if you've got Wembley Stadium, we'd have seen a few interesting shows there. Maybe we'll get shows at Craven Cottage.
Or the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium as well, that's just under that NFL deal. Why not have a WrestleMania deal or another one?
Well, if you think back in
London,
back in 1992, SummerSlam, Bret the Hitman Hart versus the British Bulldog.
Oh.
It's still
Matilda.
There you go, Matilda. It is still to this day.
Sorry.
Did you really?
I did. Let's quickly skirt on.
But that SummerSlam event in 1992, even to this day, is still one of the biggest revenue-making events that the WWE's ever seen when it comes to the amount of people purchasing tickets. So there's a huge, huge value here in the UK to do these big pay-per-views. Now, whether or not that happens now through the NXT UK brand, I guess time will tell. But I do think it's only a matter of time before perhaps the Khan family do put on a massive, gigantic event at one of the big football stadiums.
Because we're seeing as well, a lot of the stars go on to our movie screens.
They do. You look at Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and his huge Instagram following. And of course, the initial setup for that was being part of WWE. Dave Bautista, who's been in Guardians of the Galaxy. But then you also look at someone like Ronda Rousey. Now, Ronda Rousey's obviously got a huge following. She was in the main event against Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair. So all of a sudden, there's so many superstars that are going from other sports that are now looking to get into WWE. Now, the rumours are that Conor McGregor is looking to get into WWE. And if that happens, well, God knows what's going to happen with that one.
Indeed. I was just thinking, for anybody who's listening and going, it was also Winston. Yeah, I had a Winston too, and Matilda. You mentioned about women. What impact will that have? Because, of course, when I was watching it, the women were the wives, and that was really about it. But not anymore.
The women are kicking ass, Georgie.
Oh, I know.
They are kicking ass. Again, Ronda Rousey, biggest name in the women's side of mixed martial arts for UFC, headlining it with Charlotte Flair, Ric Flair's daughter, Becky Lynch. To put into perspective, the headline of WrestleMania was by the women this year. And I just think if that doesn't inspire a whole new generation of women that anything's possible, well, those three ladies, they turned on the heat and they put on a hell of a show.
I'm glowing inside at that thought. All right, well, we'll put wrestling to one side because you are also, as we've mentioned, the Associate Director at Football League 2 outfit Tranmere Rovers. you really don't get any sleep, do you? So let's talk about that. Firstly, what is your role? What does an associate director do? And this is quite new, isn't it?
It is new since the summer. I actually was helping a little bit before that, the marketing and media side of things in terms of communications. The reality is that I love the club that much. I will do anything and everything that they ask me to do. Born and bred, Tranmere fan. Gosh, used to go to so many games with my dad. First game was against Grimsby Town. And I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked. It was being part of a community. And actually, back then, it was affordable live football. And now it's still affordable live football. You know, you've got all of our players that interact with all of the fans, and they'll go into the bars afterwards and say hello to one another. It's such a massive community club. I can't even begin to tell you how privileged and fortunate I feel to be associated with the club.
We talk about a lot on this podcast, clubs lower down, apart from perhaps the top 6 in the Premier League. The funding, the sustainability, the way in which a lot of them are run, is precarious.
It is precarious, because the reality is that not every club can have a billionaire owner.
And even if you do, if that owner decides to up sticks and leave you, then where does the sustainability come from there? If you price out your fans, you price out the community, you're no longer associated with that community. We talked about eyeballs and competition for eyeballs nowadays, why would anyone be loyal to their Tranmere Rovers, to their Boltons, to their Blackpools?
Well, I mean, it's difficult for me to obviously talk about other clubs, but the reality is that at Tranmere, as I said at the start of the podcast, is that it doesn't matter who we are as individuals in terms of the people that work within the club. We care. We really, really care about our fans. The fans are the lifeblood. Without the fans, there is no club.
But you have to, I appreciate that, not to drill you on this point, but I appreciate the fact that you can't really talk about other clubs, but you are dependent, as part of a league of 96 clubs, I believe, you are dependent on the way that other clubs are run to sustain football. So anybody that wants to bury their head in the sand and say, oh, it's okay, we don't have to deal with this, we just deal with our own club, I was going to say naive, but I don't want to call you naive to your face. But you know
Maybe
what I mean?
I'm being too politically correct, George.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. I think you're being too politically correct here. I think your man at Accrington Stanley, who came out and said we really, really need to take a look at the way football is funded, the sustainability of clubs that are outside the top 6. The time is now. With so many changes at the top, the time is now, because we are going to lose some great clubs that mean so much to the community, like Tranmere means to you and the people around you.
Well, the reality is that football clubs, they have to live within their means. But at the same time, and I say this as a fan, of course you always want to be who's that next big signing going to be. And it's actually trying to find that right balance in which you're not putting the club in a precarious position. We're in a very fortunate position, the fact that we're doing really well in League Two. We've come up from the National League, which I have to say, I think Howard didn't have a heart attack after our left back got sent off within a minute. I don't know, but again, I appreciate I'm biased, but I think that was the greatest performance ever at the new Wembley. But you have to live within your means as a football club, and as a fan, that's very hard to manage those expectations. But the reality is, if you don't live within those expectations, then all of a sudden your football club might not be there anymore. And we're seeing a lot of football clubs at the moment who have been served winding up petitions for one reason or another. And you have to cherish that football club. You might be the owner of that football club, but the reality is you're just in charge of that football club until you pass it on to somebody else, because the football club, in my opinion, it's almost kind of owned by the community. And if that community doesn't have that buy-in, well, where does that football club go? But there's so much money in the Premiership, and even going down into the Championship, that actually the gulf is growing. There's absolutely no doubt about it. The question is, how do we stop that gulf from becoming to the point where actually it's impossible for, dare I say it, like what Bournemouth did, that went all the way through the leagues, all the way to get them into the Premiership. Is that impossible anymore? The big FA Cup dream, is that impossible anymore? Well, as a fan, I still think it is. I still think it is alive, but there's no doubt that we have to look at grassroots football and actually see where the money's going.
How would you run it then? Say you get implemented, your next job, because you've got loads of time on your hands. So
loads of time.
Yeah,
loads of time.
to run the whole league system. What would you do?
Well, I think the reality is that what was the football model for running it as a business, i.e., your shirt sales, the ticket sales. I don't think you can do that anymore. I think you've got to be able to offer so much more and have so many other resources in terms of actually businesses that are associated around the football club to make it self-sufficient. So God forbid if you do have an owner that actually has put loads of money and all of a sudden decides to just go somewhere else. Well, all of a sudden, if it's a self-sustaining football club and it's got businesses that are making money, well, actually, that's how you make it sustainable. But of course, people are ambitious, and you're always going to get chairmen who are going to say, actually, do you know what? We're going to take a little risk. We're going to take a punt. Because actually, if we get to this bit, we'll get this. We'll get to this bit, we'll get to that.
The rewards are so high. You mentioned there about the money that's sloshing around. To lose the Premier, to come last in the Premier League, you're earning, what, 100 million almost to go up?
It's not much, is it?
No. So, even just to go up and then come straight back down again, it's worth the risk. And you're seeing it with clubs like Fulham that took that risk and failed badly to stay in the Premier League. But you're also seeing it with other clubs as well in the Championship, so desperate to go up, they risk the club.
Yes, and actually, as a fan, what's more important? As a fan, you want your football club to exist.
Yeah, but as a fan, sorry, but this is where fans probably need to hold their hands up as well. God, I'm feisty today. And say, actually, first thing that happens when trouble is on the pitch, buy new players. If you don't go up, sack the manager. Fans have a part to play in this as well, because I don't think people really realise quite the precariousness of a financial situation of lower league clubs.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, again, you've got to look, as fans, we'd all love to sign some absolutely magnificent superstar. Let's be frank, of course we would. But at the same time, it's risk and reward, but it's got to be calculated risks. It's got to be done in a point where you're not putting the club at risk. And if you're able to do that, then fantastic. If you put all your eggs in one basket, show your cards, and it works, then good for you. But the reality is that most of the time that isn't going to work. And actually, I think there's been quite a few football clubs that have shown that it's not just about throwing how much money at something. Again, you mentioned Fulham, of course, have already been relegated from the Premiership, and they've thrown a considerable amount of money at the team. So money isn't, of course, money helps. Let's be frank, of course it does, but it isn't always the answer. It's about getting everything right on and off the pitch, where everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet. That's what's really, really important, where the communications are excellent and everybody knows what it is that we're aiming for, what we're striving for, and that the ambition can be matched on and off the pitch.
Tranmere still fighting for automatic promotion, though?
Yes, we are. We are. Oh, gosh. First and foremost, as a fan, it would mean absolutely, gosh almighty. I
won't call you the next morning then, really early.
Oh gosh, no! I'll be in a if that happened, I'd be in a gosh,
no.
Yeah, I'd be in a very very bad state of affairs. Yeah, very delicate state of affairs on that one. But yeah, I mean, look, for us, we've come up from the National League. We're doing incredibly well in League Two, and it's a wonderful time to be a Tranmere Rovers fan. It really, really is, and honestly, and I say this as a fan and working with them, I can't give enough credit to Mark and Nicola Palios. What they have done for Tranmere Rovers Football Club is just absolutely unbelievable. And the fact that we're back in League Two, fighting up there with the very best, is just an absolute credit to them. And of course also the players, the manager. It's fabulous. And look, I mean, gosh, you've got me dreaming now, Georgie. You've got me dreaming. But if we can get up to League One, wow, that'd be fantastic. Hopefully, of course, it'd be amazing if we get automatic, purely because I don't think my heart could take the playoffs again, quite frankly. But even if we just end up in the playoffs, what a season it's been. Absolutely magnificent. And there's so many positives on and off the pitch at Tranmere Rovers at the moment. The community side to the club is incredible. And there's so many people that work tirelessly behind the scenes because they love that football club. And it doesn't matter if you're bottom of the tree to the top of the tree, we all care. And that's one of the reasons why it's working so well on and off the pitch. And the future, regardless of whether we go up or not this season, the future's really bright.
Lee, I've interviewed a lot of people in sport in my time, and I don't think I've interviewed anyone quite as passionate as you about a club. It's really lovely to hear. Thank you very much, Lee. That's it for this week. If you'd like to contact us, please do. You can find me at GEC_Frost on Twitter, or This Is Money. And please do rate and review us on iTunes. It helps people find us.
Georgie, actually, before you go, I know that you're a massive wrestling fan, so it'd be wrong of me not to give you something that we had at WrestleMania. So you have
a present.
I've got you a present. Actually, I've got you two presents. I've got you one of our Wrestling Travel exclusive hats.
You do.
Adidas hats, there you go.
This is like a posh one. This is one with the stickers on that people seem to leave the stickers on.
And then we've got you one of the Wrestling Travel T-shirts that you could see people wearing on Hall of Fame behind when John Cena was doing his speech. So a little present from all of us.
That is amazing.
From Wrestling Travel to you.
That is going on social media. I like the fact that you've given me a medium T-shirt, brilliant, and an extra large hat, because you know I've got a massive size-wise head. I do. Sorry.
Goes over the headphones, you see.
I know, exactly. Oh, you're a sweetheart. Thank you so much.